This is ContraZoom, where we go back and forth about film. I'm your host, Dakota Arsenault. The 96 Academy Award nominations just got announced by Zazie Beetz and Jack Quaid on, what day is this that we're recording? Tuesday, January 23rd at very early in the morning, Los Angeles time, and at a very respectable time, Eastern Standard Time. But we are here to give our immediate reactions to the Oscar nominations and sort of say what it says a bit about the movie year and what's to come over the next few months and all that fun stuff. But joining me today is Matthew Simpson, one half of the Awesome Friday podcast, someone who, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you've now heard him many, many times, and hopefully you subscribe to his excellent podcast as well. So thank you for coming on the show, Matthew.
Oh, no, always a pleasure. Always happy to be invited.
This works out nicely. I was a little worried that I was going to come home from a vacation a little bit late and Rachel wouldn't be able to make it, and she wasn't. And so I was like, you know what? Let's bring in Matthew just in case. That way, if Rachel isn't able to make it, we still can have a great discussion, you and me. And so that's the way it's going to work out. So Rachel, unfortunately, isn't here this week, but she will be back soon enough.
I'm disappointed because I always enjoy speaking about movies with Rachel, and I feel like I don't do it often enough. So I'm going to put it out there that we should have her, and actually we should have both of you on the show at some point at the same time. We should do like a double feature on the Awesome Friday podcast with the ContraZoom crew.
I would love that. I felt like I was blacklisted or something from your show.
No, not at all. I think the only thing that ever keeps us from like having you on the show, to be totally honest, is that we talk about relatively new stuff, and you haven't always had the opportunity to see that stuff. Mm-hmm. But that's honestly, if I really think about it for more than about 0.5 of a second, that's a problem I can solve. So I will solve it soon, I promise.
That is very true. Often you'll send me a message and be like, hey, have you seen this movie yet? I'll be like, no, I have not. So I probably can't be on your show then.
Yeah. But you know, if we decide ahead of time, I could just get you the movie most likely. So let's do that sometime soon.
Let's do that sometime. Yeah. All right. And also it's always nice whenever I have someone on the show that is involved with our film critics group. I want to plug it. So, if people don't know by now, you, me, Thomas Stoneham Judge, we created our own critics group called the Cascadia Film and Television Critics Association. And we, over the month of December, awarded our top 10 films of the year and named our best Cascadian film, which was Rice Boy Sleeps. And our number one movie was Oppenheimer. And we're going to do a whole bunch of great big things. And we've already been planning how to expand and make this this baby we've created with us three men, grow into a full-size adult. That's a really weird analogy I'm making here. Please shut me up, Matthew.
I mean, if you want to go with like a 3 men in a critics group type analogy, then I'm sort of on board with that because, I like deep cut 80s references.
Okay. So do we have to decide who's Tom Selleck, who's...
I mean, I think I'm clearly the Tom Selleck personally.
Yeah. And would I be Steve Guttenberg or Ted Danson?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. Maybe we're going to have to talk with Thomas about this, about who's who in this scenario. Because I think Gutenberg, it's been a long time since I've seen that or those movies, I should say, because there's two of them. I'm not sure who's the goofy one who would be the Gutenberg, and I'm not sure who's the ladies' man who would be the Ted Danson. So, yeah.
Fair enough. Well, we're getting wildly off topic already.
We've been married for too long to be the Ted Danson at this point.
Fair enough. That is true. All right. Well, we're here to talk about Oscar nominations. And so that was announced today. And we're going to go over some of the top level ones. But I'm going to start out with movies that received multiple nominations. And I will say off the bat, I was recently on Paulo Bautista's podcast, the Oscars Death Race podcast. And for the last couple of years, I've gone on his show to predict the nominees. And while I was kind of creating my own list of nominees, I was like, man, I'm putting the same 4 movies for the same category over and over again. I had never felt that it was so top heavy before. And I'd actually gone back and looked at it and be like, wow, looking at these movies, there's often, the Oscar nominations, there's only like 1 or 2 really top heavy films. And this year it really is 4. In fact, I called the big 5 because we've got Oppenheimer with 13 nominations, Poor Things with 11 nominations, Killers of the Flower Moon with 10, Barbie with 8, and Maestro with 7. Those first four specifically, I am shocked at how many nominations they all got. Were you sort of surprised at how well those 4/5 movies really did?
So, with the caveat that I have not yet seen Poor Things, it's one of only two of like the really big nominees that I haven't had a chance to watch yet. No, I'm not really surprised at all. I'm maybe surprised that Poor Things has 11 and Barbie only has 8. But that's only because of my personal preferences, and it's actually not that surprising considering the Academy. Same with Maestro. I think personally, like, I wasn't a huge fan of Maestro. I thought it was totally fine. I think it's a little overrepresented with 7 nominations personally. But that's fine. You know, doesn't change anything in history. I don't think so. It's fine. If they're going to give it one of the top line nominations, then like, if they're going to give Bradley Cooper a nomination, I'm glad they gave him the actor one instead of the director one. But that's about it.
Very true. Yeah. Of the big films, the only ones I haven't seen is Poor Things and Maestro as well. And Maestro is a very easy one to solve. I can just pop on Netflix at any given moment and watch it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm still shocked because normally there's only one movie that gets more than 10 nominations in a given year, and we've got 3 this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big year for film. Like, the one thing, if that really highlights anything, it's that it was a really great year for film. Like, it was, I think, a historically great year for film. And I'm glad that there is such a strong showing from such a strong crop of the top performers.
Mm-hmm. And including the next batch would be movies with 5 nominations. You have American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, and The Zone of Interest. And basically between all of those movies, those 9 movies, they basically ate up all the nominations. And I have just rarely seen such a consensus of like, hey, these are, the quote unquote best movies according to the Academy, so succinctly put.
Yep. 100%. And, yeah, I mean, this is sort of an aside, but Anatomy of a Fall being on that list, I find really heartening, because I have thought since I heard they did this that France's choice to not put it forward as their best international feature choice was a huge mistake, and so I feel validated now.
Yeah, that was certainly an interesting choice for sure. We can talk about the international category a little bit because that's one I feel like I've got some pretty strong thoughts on later. But we're going to talk about some of the top level categories, picture, director, and then the 4 acting categories, and then we'll kind of jump around a little bit to sort of hit on some specific moments. But let's talk about Best Picture first. And so our nominees are American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall, Barbie, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, Poor Things, in The Zone of Interest. Now, I have, for Paulo's podcast, as I mentioned, those were the 10 movies that I had actually predicted and felt pretty confident that these were going to be the 10, just because they seem to be the same movies popping up over and over again, all the different precursors. And sort of the common thread seems to be that this might be one of the strongest Best Picture lineups ever, certainly in the 10 film era, and maybe one of the best since, 1975, I think it was. That's like the all-time great year for Best Picture nominees. What is your first impressions of this Best Picture group?
I think it's as strong as it probably could be if we're going to have 10 nominees. I mean, there's only one film I can think of that I would like to see in the Best Picture race that isn't, and they were never going to nominate it, so I don't feel terrible about it. I'm not a huge fan of Maestro, and I wasn't a huge fan of Killers of the Flower Moon, but I 100% get why they are nominated. But other than that, yeah, like it's a super strong lineup. I'm super stoked. There's choices I wouldn't like, but I would say there's basically no bad choices, if that resonates with you.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way of saying it. I've seen 7 of the 10 so far, with American Fiction, American Fiction, Maestro, and Poor Things being the 3 that I hadn't seen. And from what I know about them, they all kind of seem right up my alley. And there's a couple in this group of 7 that I have seen that I'm not super crazy about, but I'm not mad that it's in this category either, because it often seems like every single year there's one or two movies in the Best Picture lineup. Sometimes that movie has won Best Picture in recent years, where it was difficult to get through. I'm angry that it's there, and it shut out a more deserving film that actually stood a realistic chance. Because you and I, we watch so many movies, there's bound to be some small little indie movie or a movie from a country and the movie's not in English that we're like, hey, I would love it if this made it to the Oscars. But as you always say on your podcast, that the Oscars are a regional award show and you kind of have to treat it as such. The fact that we've got two movies not in English is a fantastic achievement for a regional award show.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I guess you could even argue that because there's Zone of Interest and Anatomy of a Fall, but also Past Lives is predominantly Korean as well. Mm-hmm. It's an American film, but it's predominantly in Korean. And we didn't get any weird category hijinks with it like we have at other awards shows in the past.
Yeah. Past Lives sort of reminds me a bit of like the Minari nomination, where it is still American film that stars American talent, but it's not in English. Coincidentally, also a Korean film.
Yeah,
but very.
That's exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, overall, I'm pretty satisfied with this. I'm very excited to watch the three films I haven't seen yet and sort of make my choice of this. But what would you say right now? A, who do you think the front runner is? And B, of the ones you've seen, what is your favorite of the group?
So again, with the caveat that the two that I haven't seen are Poor Things and The Zone of Interest. I think the front runner's probably Oppenheimer. Probably. It's won enough of the precursors, and it's the one with the most, and that's usually a pretty good indicator for me. My favorite film of the year was Past Lives, so I would love to see it win. And I would probably at this point personally put Anatomy of a Fall above Oppenheimer as well. But yeah, I think Oppenheimer's probably the one to beat. I think the dark horse number 2 is probably actually going to be The Holdovers. I think it's probably going to be Oppenheimer or The Holdovers.
Yeah, I feel like The Holdovers could potentially surprise some people as well, just because it does probably how am I trying to word this? It probably checks off a lot of boxes for a lot of voters, and maybe especially since it's a preferential voting ballot for Best Picture specifically, you could see it maybe being the number 2 or number 3 movie for a lot of different people voting.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think it's building a lot of momentum because I think it was a little bit of a shock when Paul Giamatti won his first award this season. But then he's won 2 or 3 now. And you also have Divine Joy Randolph winning award after award for her supporting performance. And yeah, I just think it's building momentum in that sort of like, it sounds bad, but like in that sort of second choice kind of way. I feel like it's really building a bit of momentum. It's kind of that one that like, yeah, everyone's going to put like number 2 or number 3. And then the number 1 vote is going to be split between like the Oppenheimers and Killers of the Flower Moons and Barbies of the world.
Yeah. So for me, I agree with you. I think Oppenheimer is the one to beat. Anytime a movie has the most nominations, I think you have to call it the odds-on favorite to win Best Picture. That isn't always the case. It doesn't always win, but I believe more often than not, it is the case. And as far as my favorite of the group, I would have to say probably Zone of Interest. There's quite a few movies. I really love The Holdovers. I quite enjoyed Killers of the Flower Moon. The Holdovers I thought was excellent. But Zone of Interest was one that's in my top 10 films of the year. I believe it's only one. Yeah, I think the Zone of Interest and Oppenheimer are the only two that are currently in my top 10 from last year.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was quite... yeah, I didn't realize you didn't have so many of these films in there. A lot of these films... Let's see here. 1, 2. It's not that many. 3, 4 of them were in my top 10 last year.
There we go.
But again, to be fair, 2 of them I haven't seen, and I didn't see The Holdovers until after 2023 was over, and I didn't see American Fiction until after 2023 was over either. But they probably would have been like, if I was making a top 20, they would have made it. But I don't think they would have cracked my top 10.
Fair enough. Yeah. All right. Let us move on to Best Director. And we've got Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall, Martin Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon, Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer, Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things, and Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest. Now, I'm trying to figure out if I can see this about how many women now have been nominated for Best Director. I cannot.
I think it's 9, isn't it?
Yeah,
Something
it
like
is
that.
certainly not very much. So I know there was a bit of concern where Greta Gerwig was originally one of the ones that was, in the running to be nominated for Best Director. And as the sort of nomination announcement was coming closer, she had been missing a lot of the bigger precursors, but Trier had started making more of them. But there was also still a bit of a concern that this would be a year that had quite a few really fantastic films directed by women, and there might have been a snub by women altogether in this category, but luckily that's not the case. We at least have one. It's a shame once again that we can't seem to have more than one in a given year. But I'm despite the fact that I'm not a huge fan of Anatomy of a Fall, I still think it's really great that she's in there, and I think she did a hell of a job directing that film.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, so first of all, I was wrong. It's not 9, it's 8. She's the 8th woman.
Okay.
So I will say that despite me thinking that there's at least one pretty major snub in this category, there are also no bad choices in this category. Like, everyone who is nominated is deserving. If anything, I would say that if we were going to, if there was ever an argument to expand the number of nominees in any other category, it would be this year's crop of directors. Because personally, I think that Greta Gerwig and Celine Song at least should be also included. At least.
Yeah, and that's to say nothing of the fact that that Alexander Payne wasn't nominated for The Holdovers, which he was kind of maybe in the running a little bit there. But overall, I think the 5 that are nominated here are probably matching up with maybe, with the exception of The Holdovers, the most likely to win Best Picture as well.
Yeah, I would agree. Like I say, there's no bad choices here. They're all, I think, very deserving. I think it's probably Nolan's to lose, would be my guess. But it's the Academy, so I have no idea.
I would say that too. It's sort of interesting that the narrative about Nolan being long overdue has been running for quite a long time. And as much as I love The Departed, Martin Scorsese winning Best Director for The Departed was often seen as it's a bit of a career achievement award, even though I thought it was fully deserving. I think Christopher Nolan was running the risk of he's eventually going to get a Best Director Oscar, but is it going to be for the right film? And I think Oppenheimer is the right film for him to win. So it is both a career achievement and a well-deserved win if he does end up winning. And ironically, I think if Nolan wasn't in this category, if Oppenheimer hadn't come out, I think Scorsese might have gotten win number 2 with this, with Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah, I will say that even though I wasn't a huge fan of that film, not that I disliked it, but even though I wasn't a huge fan, like, it is wonderfully directed. It is, all of his more, I want to say all of his tricks are on screen, but they're not tricks. They're all of his like refined techniques are on screen. Everything from it's interesting, like, how he can make a shot reverse shot conversation so much more dynamic and interesting than so many other directors in the world. And I don't know how he does it because he's not doing it that differently, but it is. And I'm sure that at least part of that is performances as well. But like the way he's directing those performances is a big part of that, right? So
that is true. Yeah.
I think honestly, if there's a dark horse in this category, I kind of think that Yorgos Lanthimos might be the sort of like the dark horse. They might come from behind and take it away from him. Just because Poor Things is getting so many accolades, so many acting accolades, and it's such a, again, it's one of the ones I haven't seen, but it is, meant to be such a bold artistic swing that I think that's the kind of thing the one thing I always say is that the 2 things I always say are that the Academy is a regional award show, and it doesn't, it's like, whose line is it anyway? Everything's made up and the points don't matter. But also, the Academy in my opinion, often goes for most instead of, say, best. So, and I think that you could argue that Poor Things, even just from the trailer, might be the most movie on the list.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's not like Lanthimos is new to the Oscars as well, because he was nominated for Best Director for The Favorite. He got a screenplay nomination for The Lobster. So this is his third film to get representation at the Oscars. And more often than not, you kind of need to have a bit of a track record. They rarely award newcomers or people who are sort of just breaking through on the Oscar stage. So someone like Justine Triet, if she has a couple more Oscar type movies, maybe then she'll sort of, be considered one of the front runners for an Oscar. But Lanthimos is very quickly getting to that stage where, he's been around long enough.
Yep, 100%. And on that point, it's true what you mentioned about them having to have a bit of a track record. So on that point, it's even more egregious to me that Greta Gerwig is not nominated, given that she has directed 3 films and she has had 3 films nominated for Best Picture at this point. So it's getting to be a little bit like, about her lack of not. This is her. That's the biggest sticking point for me. Like, whether or not you like Barbie, it's a really, really well directed film, and it was a big cultural moment. And I'm just going to keep repeating that I think her snub is egregious.
Yeah, that's fair, especially since the Academy's the Academy likes to reward movies that do well at the box office that are also good movies. Think of stuff of like the way Avatar always gets its nominations and stuff like that. So it's not surprising because Barbie still did get 8 nominations, but it's a little surprising that one of them wasn't for Best Director.
Yeah. And also, like, we spent the whole year, or at least the last half of the year, talking about how Oppenheimer and Barbie together saved the movies. So why aren't we rewarding it just on that? Because,
yeah,
Greta Gerwig is responsible for that.
Very true. All right, let us move over to the next category, and we're going to talk about Best Actor here. And so we've got Bradley Cooper for Maestro, Coleman Domingo for Rustin, Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers, Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer, and Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction. I think there's a few surprises here in the sense of like, oh, that's a little curious, but nothing is super egregious. I would say Coleman Domingo and Rustin sort of stands out a little bit. I watched it. The movie isn't really great, but Coleman Domingo is excellent in everything Coleman Domingo is in. So I'm not like offended by this nomination. It's just one of those times where I'm like, I kind of wish it was a better movie sort of thing. But other than that, I think, with the exception of depending your thoughts on Bradley Cooper as a whole, who the Academy absolutely adores. So despite what, film Twitter or any other social media website will have you think about Bradley Cooper, the Academy friggin' loves the guy. So there's no way he was sort of missing in Best Actor, at least. This sort of lineup was protected.
They don't love him too much because they've never given him an award.
They don't, no, but he's got like something like, at this point, I think like 15 nominations. Most of them are for producing over the years because he's produced several movies that he hasn't been in. He's been nominated for 12 Oscars now, which is insane. If you had told someone that'd be like, hey, how many Oscars has Bradley Cooper been nominated for? They would never guess 12.
No, not at all. And it is a lot for like nomination awards too, right? Like, oh no, it's mostly acting awards that he's been nominated for. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for acting, 2 for writing, and 3 for Best Picture.
Yeah, that's still pretty crazy.
That is pretty crazy.
Yeah. But what are your thoughts on the category as a whole? Like, do you have any sort of oversight with this group? Or are you like, this is kind of what I predicted anyways?
No, it's pretty much how I thought it. This one very much feels like a 2-horse race to me, with Paul Giamatti and Cillian Murphy. I am honestly like, I haven't seen Rustin. I have heard a lot about it. I am not surprised to see Coleman Domingo on this list because if there's any way to get an Oscar nomination, just like check off the boxes, like, Boomer era civil rights activist, important person, check. Person of color, check. Dead, check. You know, like there's a number of things that pretty much guarantee you an Oscar, and he's got like 4 or 5 of them with this movie. So I'm not surprised to see him there at all. But I think given how much of a 2-horse race this category feels like, at least, Coleman Domingo being Academy Award nominated has a great ring to it, and so does Jeffrey Wright. And honestly, like,
Yes.
so does Bradley Cooper. I don't think that Maestro is a very good movie. I think but my big problem with it is I would say probably the writing, actually. The direction is actually very good. And I think Bradley Cooper is very good. It's just really shallow.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm fine with him being on the actor list.
Yeah, fair enough. I will say this, that it's absolutely insane that Jeffrey Wright had never been nominated for an Oscar before, considering,
Right?
He's probably one of, the greatest actors of the past, 30 plus years. Unfortunately, a lot of times he is working with smaller parts or movies that don't get as wide acclaim or earn as much in the box office, except for, if you count like the Bond films or something like that. He often works in the smaller indie sphere. And so it's one of those things where it's crazy that he's never been nominated, but then you kind of like look over his movies, unless like maybe Basquiat should have been his one time before, but like, yeah, it's definitely insane that Jeffrey Wright, first time Oscar nominee.
Yeah, 100% agree on that front, for sure.
Let's move over to Best Actress, though. Keep this moving along. We've got Annette Bening for Nyad, Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon, Sandra Hüller for Anatomy of a Fall, Carey Mulligan for Maestro, and Emma Stone for Poor Things. I will say this, since it's going to pop up again in supporting actress. Nyad getting double nominations is just absolutely wild, because it is a 100% mediocre movie at best.
It's a legacy nomination. Annette Bening does not have an Academy Award. She's been an actor for 40 years. She has like half a dozen nominations to her name, or 6 nominations to her name, and has never won. So she's in the same position that like Glenn Close was for a while there, where like every time Glenn Close was in a movie, they just started giving her nominations. And I feel like this is the one category where I don't think Nyad is a very good movie. I think Annette Bening is totally fine in it, completely adequate. I think that her being in this category keeps at least 1 or 2 other better choices out of it, and I'm a little bit upset about it. But yeah, I don't want to cast aspersions, though, because I think Annette Bening is a good actor. And I think it was a decent performance in a perfectly cromulent movie. But there are such better choices that could be in this list.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Just like Best Actor being a 2-horse race, I would say Best Actress is also a 2-horse race between Lily Gladstone and Emma Stone. It sort of seemed like Lily Gladstone had all but locked it up, but Emma Stone has also been kind of pulling up and winning quite a few awards along the way as well. And so it's going to be really interesting to sort of see where it goes between the two of them. Lily Gladstone is of note, being the first Indigenous American actress to get a Best Actress nomination, which is a huge honor, and also one of those, like, I can't believe it's taken this long, which is unfortunately a circumstance of there just has not been enough parts or big movies to in the history of Hollywood, which is a real shame. But she does a terrific job in Killers of the Flower Moon, so very well deserved for her.
Oh yeah, she's far and away the best part of that movie. And yeah, you're right. It's a 2-horse race. I would love to see Sandra Hüller walk away with this award, though. I think Carey Mulligan is fine. Like, she's also very good in Maestro. But yeah, it's going to be Gladstone or Stone. And at this point, if you had asked me to choose, my answer would be ask me again after the SAG Awards, because I have no idea.
That's probably actually the best way to go, because that's probably how it's going to go, because the acting branch is the largest branch at the Oscars, and how the SAG Awards go usually follow how the Oscars go.
It's also the last one before the Oscars, and I don't 100% know this year, but in previous years, the Oscar voting deadline has been after the SAG Awards, and so it has really had a big impact on the momentum in the past. Now, I didn't think to look this up ahead of time, but I don't know if that's the case this year. But it has historically been a big momentum shifter. Like it's pretty not pretty well. You could argue that's the reason that Troy Kotsur won his Best Supporting Actor one, because he won the SAG and he hadn't won anything before it, and then he won the Oscar. Like it's a pretty, everyone was like, oh yeah, that guy, and voted for him after the SAGs. And I think a lot of actors probably wait for it. So I don't have any inside baseball on that, but that's just how it feels,
Well, that could potentially happen again, because the SAG Awards are on February 24th and voting ends for the Oscars on February 27th.
Yeah, there you go. It's 3 days, and it could be a big 3 days for voting.
Mm-hmm. All right, let us move on to Best Supporting Actor. We've got Sterling K. Brown for American Fiction, Robert De Niro for Killers of the Flower Moon, Robert Downey Jr. for Oppenheimer, Ryan Gosling for Barbie, and Mark Ruffalo for Poor Things. I think the sort of the one surprise is Sterling K. Brown. I sort of feel like he was on a lot of people's wish list of like, oh, it'd be really awesome if Sterling K. Brown got a nomination. But I don't think as many people were super confident that he would end up actually getting the nomination. The other four feel like they were pretty locked in before it was announced. And honestly, unfortunately to Sterling K. Brown, I really think it could be any one of the other four guys. I could see it being De Niro. I can see it being Downey. I could see it being Gosling, and I could see it being Ruffalo. I have no idea where to go with this award right now.
I still think it's Robert Downey Jr.'s to lose at this point. And I've had that opinion. So I saw Oppenheimer at the preview IMAX screening here in Vancouver, which was a couple of days before it was released to the general public. And the first thing I said when I got out of it was, if this movie wins only one award, it will be Robert Downey Jr. for Best Supporting Actor. So I'm still pretty confident it's going to be him. I would love to see Ryan Gosling pick up this award. And I'm ecstatic to see Sterling K. Brown on it, because they should just give him an Oscar, because he's always great. Jeffrey Wright is amazing. I would say that Sterling K. Brown is maybe the best part of American Fiction. He's so good in that movie.
Interesting. I'm very excited to see it, and I know my wife is a big fan of Sterling K. Brown, and I've only seen him in a few things, so he's still a little bit of an unknown for me. But I'm very excited to see his work in the movie.
Yeah, he's so versatile, and like everything. I don't think I've ever seen him in anything that he was not basically the best part of. Even bad movies. Like I've seen him in some bad movies, and he's always still great in them. So if you want a good example of that, don't do this, but watch The Predator, which is a bad movie, but he's so good in it. He's so much fun.
Fair enough. Okay, and then the last big category I want us to touch on is Best Supporting Actress. We've got Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer, Danielle Brooks for The Color Purple, America Ferrera for Barbie, Jodie Foster for Nyad, and Divine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers. And I think, it's Divine Joy Randolph seems to be the front runner for this, with Emily Blunt, maybe on the back of the Oppenheimer bandwagon, could stand a bit of a chance there, depending on how things go. But I will have to say, the other three nominees of Brooks, Ferrera, and Foster are all sort of complete surprises. I know supporting actress is sort of a wide open category. I had thought that maybe Penelope Cruz would sneak in there for Ferrari or someone else. The Color Purple, this is its only nomination, which is a little bit surprising. It didn't get into original song or anywhere else. America Ferrera, I know that's a part that has divided a lot of people. She had one really emotional monologue that some people seem to really resonate with, and some people seem to really hate the actual writing of that monologue. I fall somewhere a little bit in the middle of that, where I'm not really a fan of the writing of the actual monologue, but she does give it her all, so I can't fault her for that. And then, of course, the Jodie Foster for Nyad, as mentioned when we were talking about Annette Bening. She's terrific because she's Jodie Foster, and she's terrific in everything she does, but it is such a mediocre movie.
Yeah, 100%. Again, like, I love Jodie Foster. I think she was actually better in this movie than Annette Bening was. I have no idea why she's on this list.
Yeah.
But again, it feels like, even though she already has one, just one? She have one or two? I think she has one. No, she has 2 Academy Awards, doesn't she? Now I have to look it up.
Yes, for Silence of the Lambs and for Oh, what's the other one?
The other one, yeah.
She didn't win it for Taxi Driver. She was nominated, but
Oh no, it was The Accused. It was The Accused.
The Accused. Yes, that's it. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And again, I don't know why she's on this list. Like, you can't even, because of that, you can't even really call it like a legacy award or legacy nomination, right? She's not missing it. And she's good. She's really good in this not very good movie. But ultimately, yeah, I think it's Divine Randolph's to lose. She's won every award under the sun so far as I can remember. And B, she is the best of three amazing performances in that movie. She's by far the best. And she's not only the best, she's the best with the least fleshed out character of all three of the parts. Like, she's the most thinly drawn of all three of them. And she manages to turn it into something with like real depth and resonance with very little to work with. It's a really amazing performance.
And I say this is also payback for her missing nomination for Dolomite Is My Name, which not only in my opinion was a snub, she should have been the winner that year for supporting actress.
I don't remember who was against her, who would have been against her that year, but 100% she was so good in that movie. That movie itself was just so good and really, I think, under-celebrated.
I agree. I think it had to do with the fact that Eddie Murphy is sort of blacklisted by the Academy after he kind of turned his nose up at them after his Dreamgirls nomination, and he ain't getting it back in their good books anytime soon.
No, probably not.
I will say this for Nyad. The reason why I think it's here is Netflix decided to make Maestro its main push, and then it decided to make Nyad its second main push, whereas every other studio had a much deeper roster and were trying to submit 3 to 4 movies. You look at something like A24 or Neon or any of the other studios, and I think for Netflix it was really easy to be like, everyone loves Maestro already, let us push Nyad a bit.
And it's easy to see why too. Again, like, 2 great actresses with a ton of clout. Very easy to get nominated. And this is another reason why, everything's made up and the points don't matter, because when it comes down to it, the Oscars have as much to do with how well the studios market to the voting base as anything else, maybe more than anything else. So.
And it was also directed by recent Oscar winners. I can't remember their names. I think it's Jimmy Chin and Elizabeth, I can't remember her last name, who won for Best Documentary Feature for Free Solo, a genuinely exhilarating and breathtaking documentary about rock climbing. And this is their debut narrative feature, and woof.
Yeah, it's Jimmy Chin, and her name is, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to mispronounce this, but it's Elizababeth Chai Vasarhelyi.
Yes. Thank you for the look.
And yeah, agreed. Free Solo is so good, and they've done some other documentary stuff that if you have a chance to see it is good. And it's kind of surprising how fine this is based on that. And how boringly it's shot based on those.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. All right, those are kind of the big 6 categories. Are there any categories that you want to quickly hit that we can talk about briefly?
I mean, how much time do we have here? I would say that. I mean, the big one for me is that I kind of wish Godzilla -1 was nominated for more, but it was never going to be. It's just not the kind of movie the Academy is going to go for. But it did at least get a Best Visual Effects nomination, which honestly I think it should probably win, given that the total budget for that film was something like $15 million, and one guy did it all, including writing, directing, and the special effects. So give him that award, please. No, I mean, that's
let's stay on visual effects for a second. Yeah, let's stay on visual effects for a second, because I will say I think the Academy has really sort of cleaned up its act in recent years, because as someone who has been an Oscar death racer for over a decade now, which is the act of watching literally every single nominated movie, including the shorts, including, the song and visual effect movie, all that sort of stuff, I've sat through some real garbage films that were nominated for Best Visual Effects of movies that frankly had terrible visual effects just because they were a big budget movie that featured CGI, it deserved to be nominated. I would say in the last few years, they've really sort of cleaned that up and for the most part are nominating decent movies. Now, I will say, like a movie like The Creator, a movie I really did not like, and I will preface this by saying is your co-host Simon's number one favorite movie of the year, which I'm not going to start a fight here. I'm just going to say that he's wrong.
I'm not going to fight you on it. I didn't like it either. I thought it was fine, totally fine.
Yes,
but it is honestly the biggest visual feast of the year.
Yes,
and if there's anything weird about this category, honestly, it's that Oppenheimer's not on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I talked about that on Paulo's podcast, and my rationale is that Nolan pissed off the VFX branch by saying that his movie contains no CGI, which is a goddamn lie. Every single movie, including the most smallest of dramas, kitchen sink dramas, has CGI in it.
Yeah. I don't get why directors, I sort of get why directors say that because there's a certain subset of like film goers that respond to it, but it's always a lie.
Yeah.
And I feel like we should be, as a society, we should be dispelling that lie and like talking about appropriate use of CGI rather than overuse. Cause it's used all the time. Like it's usually invisible. And I don't know why they don't say it. It's really frustrating to me.
Mm-hmm. Especially since practical effects is a part of the best visual effects category too. So by that logic alone, making a bomb and blowing it up is a visual effect.
Well, especially so making
it definitely
a
should
bomb
be.
That is like, how was it, like half scale to clear, like, or something like that. Like it's a huge bomb, and then shooting it and covering it from multiple angles, and with IMAX camera. Like it's to say it's not an achievement in visual effects is just incorrect. And having seen every movie in this category, I will say that I could see why every movie in this category is nominated, but I would still swap out any one of the other three that we haven't talked about for Oppenheimer at this point.
Fair enough.
And two of those movies I really liked. So do with that what you will.
Let's briefly talk about Best International Film. It's a category that's usually my favorite as far as having the most movies I love in a given year. This year, it's got Io Capitano from Italy, Perfect Days from Japan, Society of the Snow from Spain, The Teacher's Lounge from Germany, and The Zone of Interest, the noted British film, which is always sort of funny. This is a really solid lineup. I've only seen 3 of them so far. I haven't seen Io Capitano or Perfect Days, but Perfect Days did win the Golden Palm at the Cannes Film Festival, and Io Capitano was a bit of a surprise for me. I did not think he was going to get in it, but it did play at Venice and compete for the Golden Lion and stuff like that. But overall, once again, a very strong year, even if you can quibble with the movies that are actually submitted by the different countries, which is. It's a very imperfect system, in a system that I wish was better, but I don't necessarily know the best way forward that is fair for smaller countries.
No, I don't have good answers for it either, to be totally honest. But it is weird. It is weird the choices that are made. This is actually, like, I would love to talk more about this category, but I've actually, embarrassingly, only seen one of the 5 nominees at this point. And that one is very good, but I haven't seen 4 of them. And so I don't really have a dog in the race at this point. I really want to, though. Io Capitano looks amazing. I've wanted to see Zone of Interest since I heard about it. I've actually been trying to get Perfect Days from Mubi for the past little while, and they won't give it to me. So I'm trying to fix that. And I remember specifically at Vancouver Film Festival, I think it was you and Thomas both raving about the Teacher's Lounge. So I wanted to see that since the festival as well. But like I say, the only one I've seen is Society of the Snow, which is very good. And I'm kind of surprised that if Netflix was going to do a big push on a second film, that it was Naiad and not Society of the Snow.
I actually thought Society of the Snow, because that was a movie I hadn't heard of until the Oscar shortlist came out a few weeks ago, and never even heard of it, despite the fact that I've seen a previous J.A. Bayona film, which was The Impossible, which was also nominated for Best Visual Effects back in the day. He also made films like The Orphanage and stuff like that. Never heard of it, and all of a sudden it appeared on basically every single shortlist, from international to hair and makeup, which it got a nomination for score, and a few other things, where I'm just like, oh, I have not heard of this movie at all. Looking it up, and you're like, oh, this is a Netflix movie that comes out in like a week. I don't know this. Watched it. It was very enjoyable. Quite a fun little movie about a plane crash in the mountains, and people that need to survive in the harrowing depths they need to go to ensure their survival.
Yeah, I think fun is maybe the wrong word. But this guy knows how to shoot a movie, man. Like, he's made the only one of his that I haven't seen is A Monster Calls. But The Orphanage is good. The Impossible is really good. I will go to bat for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. I don't think any of those films the Jurassic World films are particularly good, but Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, I will say, is the most visually striking of the three, is the only one that remembers how to make dinosaurs look cool and at least tries to be something different. I feel like that franchise is constantly squandering opportunities to do something new, and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is the only one that did something even remotely new. So I'm very happy to see him on this list. Now I just need to see the rest of the movies, basically.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'll point this out as my last really main point, and then if you have anything else you want to follow up with. I'm very happy that The Wonderful World of Henry Sugar, Wes Anderson's short, a part of his Roald Dahl 4-pack that came out earlier this year, got nominated. I was actually wondering if Wes Anderson and Netflix was going to not submit any of the shorts at all, just because it's like, hey, it's Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson doesn't actually need to be nominated for a best live action short Oscar. Maybe, I don't want to say more deserving directors and filmmakers compete for the category. So I'm a little surprised, but I think Netflix wasn't going to miss up the opportunity to get one of their produced films nominated.
Yep. I haven't seen it yet, but I've been trying to. I'm basically trying to see where it is right now. But there is a Canadian film on the list for best live action short as well. That I'm always happy to see something Canadian on the list. So I'm looking for a way to watch Invincible right now.
Nice. Yeah, we Canada usually gets a nomination either in animated short or live action short. Usually one of those categories in a given year will have a nomination from Canada.
Yeah, it is interesting that, like, the one area of cinema that Canada does really well in is the National Film Board does a really, really good job with short films. And I feel like we do get one what feels like every year.
Yeah. Do you have any other categories you want to go into, or do you think we kind of covered the main ones?
No, I mean, I think we covered the main stuff. I feel like this is going to be an interesting year because there's so many good films with so many nominations. I couldn't tell you who's going to win them all. Right. I kind of hope there's an even split. I hope that one film is not dominant. But it's interesting because I don't know what to predict this year, like, at all. I just don't.
Yeah, I haven't gone through and started, earmarking who I think might win, but just on a cursory glance, it does sort of seem like it's going to be spread out a little bit, especially among those, big 4 or 5 films.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, well then, before we start recording, I asked if you can maybe come prepared with 1 to 2 surprises that were nominated. So these are movies that you're happy they got in, and were a bit of a pleasant surprise to get in as well. So what do you have on that list?
So for nice surprise nominations, I'm super happy Justin Triet is nominated for Anatomy of a Fall as the director. I'm actually super happy to see America Ferrera on the list for Best Supporting Actress as well. I know that you weren't a huge fan of her monologue, but I thought she was great in the whole movie. I thought she was very authentic and human, and kind of in many ways the sort of heart and soul of the movie, along with her daughter, played by Ariana Greenblatt. I'm also super happy to see Sterling K. Brown on the list again. Like I think I said that before, that like um, I was kind of expecting this category to be Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio, and I, I again, I'm not the hugest fan of Killers of the Flower Moon, but I certainly expected to see Leo's name on the list, and I'm very surprised and very happy to see that it's actually Sterling K. Brown.
Fair enough. Okay. Okay, for my list, I would say El Conde getting in for cinematography was a pretty big surprise. That was a movie I put on, I think, about a week or two ago. I'm a big fan of Pablo Larraín's work, the director. He made films like Jackie and Diana and the great Chilean film No. And this is a film about what if the Chilean dictator Augustus Pinochet was actually a vampire, and it shot in black and white, and it's basically a horror movie about as an allegory of a dictator being a vampire and, you know, sucking blood from his people, quite literally. And it's a beautifully shot film. It's on Netflix, so it's super easy for people to watch. And if you like vampire horror movies with a really good social commentary, this is probably going to be up your alley. Definitely a surprise.
I didn't like that movie.
Oh, really?
So I will say it is beautifully shot. Like that's my main feedback. We covered this on the Awesome Friday podcast, and that was sort of our main feedback, is that it is a beautifully shot, super boring movie. So I did not connect with it at all. But like it being on the list is a nice surprise, actually, because it is gorgeous. There's one sequence in particular with a new vampire dancing through the air that is, in particular, just wonderful to watch.
Mm-hmm. And then another surprise would be The Teacher's Lounge getting in for Best International Film. You mentioned it. I came out of seeing it at VIFF absolutely raving about it. It came on behalf of a recommendation of Jeff Bulmer from Classic Movies Live, who said it was one of the best things he saw at TIFF. And I was like, I've never even heard of this movie. I'm going to add it to my watch list. And I went in and it blew me away. And while I sort of predicted it was going to get into Best International Film, I feel like that category is such a wild card to begin with. I was like, it's going to be zone of interest and who knows what else. So I was pleasantly surprised that it actually made the cut, even though I did predict it probably was going to get there. And then the last one would be Nimona for animated. It was a movie I really liked. You know, animated is also a bit of a tricky one. You know, I think everyone knew that it was going to be Spider-Verse and The Boy and the Heron, and then it was sort of be like, well, what else is going to make the cut? And so I'm very happy that Nimona was one of them, because that is such a unique and delightful film.
I agree. I was actually super happy to see Nimona on a number of lists this year. And because I didn't think it would. It felt like, because I remember Serves, it's one that like it started at Disney and then it got shunted to Sony and Netflix. And I feel like it had a really like sort of troubled production history. And I didn't think it would really, despite being wonderful, I didn't think it would really have any legs in award season, but it's been nice to see it on all these nominees lists for sure.
Same. Okay. Now, I asked you a similar question of, do you have a couple snubs that you were surprised about? And by snubs, I mean movies that, you know, legitimately had a chance to get nominated. Like, I absolutely adored How to Blow Up a Pipeline. I was under no pretenses that it was going to get any Oscar nominations at all. So I'm not including that as one of my snubs. So what were your sort of realistic snubs that you were surprised about?
So we've already talked about how much I think Greta Gerwig should be on the Best Directors docket. So I don't think I need to revisit that. She should be there. End of story. I think that they should have swapped out Annette Bening for Margot Robbie in the Best Actress category as well. Because it is the central performance of that film. It's a very easy film to connect with and empathize with. And the reason for that is that Margot Robbie is all in. And if they weren't going to sub in Margot Robbie, they also could have subbed in Greta Lee from Past Lives, who it's amazing to me that film is nominated for Best Picture and Best Screenplay, I think it is, right? Best Original, but not for Director, Actor, or Actress. So I think all three of those, I sort of have reservations about saying she should be that Celine Song should be up for Best Director, because I mean, I think it would be perfectly deserved, but the thing you said earlier about there needing to be some kind of like track record is basically right. Really, like most people don't get nominated for their first film, no matter how good of a first film it is. Which I think gives her some weight in the screenplay category. But I think there's absolutely no excuse for Margot Robbie or Greta Lee to not be in the Best Actress category, right? Like they're both transcendent performances. They're both big. One is, I think, the most beautiful performance of the year, and the other is, at the very least, one of the biggest cultural touchstones of the year, and they're not on the list. Yeah, I mean, I don't. What else can I say?
Yeah. I definitely agree with one of your picks there.
Well, and the other one would be that, like, similarly, I think it's, again, I think it's great that Sterling K. Brown made the cut for Best Supporting Actor. I would probably swap him and Robert De Niro out, personally, for Teo Yu from Past Lives, and also for Charles Melton from May December. Personally,
nice.
Those are again, they're both probably the most heartfelt, and in one case, like gut-wrenching performances of the year. And again, I know, Melton has won a couple things. He won a Gotham Award, and there's a fair chance he'll pick up an Indie Spirit or something as well. But it's interesting to me, and it just goes back to what I said before, that like I feel like the Academy rewards most rather than best, and both of those performances are very understated. And it's just unfortunately not the kind of thing that the Academy goes for. They don't go for the quiet, reserved, emotionally devastating thing when they can go for something big, right? And so I'm not surprised they didn't get nominated, but I am disappointed.
Fair enough. Okay, so for my picks, my first snub was Fallen Leaves for International, another film that I saw during VIFF, and I absolutely loved. It is from Finland, directed by Aki Kaurismäki, and was really thinking that it stood a shot to get a nomination, and was quite surprised. I think my surprise comes from the fact that Io Capitan got in, and Society of the Snow being such a late push, and so I was really expecting Fallen Leaves to be one of the five finalists after it was shortlisted.
That's out now too. It's out on Mubi, so anyone who wants to see it can. And it is a lovely film. I've seen it. I've seen it, and I very much enjoyed it. And it's out in a way you can see it.
Mm-hmm. Especially, I was also sort of surprised because Kaurismäki, it was my first time watching one of his movies, but he's got a very long track record, and he's definitely, sort of up there as one of the most revered directors of the 21st century from international cinema. So I was a little surprised that his sort of like biggest breakthrough movie so far didn't get a nomination.
Yeah, that's fair too.
Another big surprise for me was Beyond Utopia missing for documentary, where documentary branch is, the most confusing branch to predict, because every single year it's like, what movie do you think is going to be the front runner to win best documentary? You know what? Psych, never mind. We're not even going to nominate it. It seems to be like that every year. And Beyond Utopia, which is about North Korean refugees who are it sort of tells a story of a family fleeing North Korea and sort of what it takes to get them to safety to South Korea, and also interviewing people who had escaped North Korea previously. And it is stunning, the footage and information that we learn about North Korea in a way that I don't think has ever been told on such a scale before, and is absolutely stunning. And I think a lot of people would have predicted it to be the front runner to win, and it didn't even get a nomination, which is shocking.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I have heard you rave about it before. So yep, sure. I'm with you.
And then my last one, you sort of covered it a little bit. I would say the May December acting trio. The fact that not a single one of them, of Natalie Portman, Julianne Moore, or Charles Melton, where I didn't think all three of them would get in, but I expected at least one of them to get in. And I think the fact that Nyad got 2 nominations probably took away the spots that were maybe earmarked for Portman and Moore is certainly surprising. I think supporting actor is probably the most stacked out of the 4 categories. So I'm not super surprised that Charles Melton didn't get in there, but I would have loved to see him get in.
Yeah, you're not wrong too. And it's another case of like, that's also a Netflix movie. Like, why did, like, first off, I get why Maestro got the big push, right? I talked before about like movies that have all these check boxes that the Academy loves, like Significant Person of the 20th Century, biopic, Dead, well performed by a person with a lot of nominations, but no, like it hits so many of those boxes. But like, why was May December not pushed harder? Why was Society of the Snow not pushed harder? Because there's so much good in both of those, especially compared to Nyad. And again,
yeah,
I don't even think Nyad is bad. It's just fine. It's almost worse that it's just, at least it was bad. It might be interesting. But it's just fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what to say about that. The only thing I could maybe think is maybe people were confused of if it was actually a comedy or drama, and that threw off people enough to not vote for it. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, but that just shouldn't have any bearing on like the performances. The performances are good either way.
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, but we've rambled on long enough. If you are subscribed to this channel, which I hope you are, there's going to be plenty of Oscar content coming your way. Next week, it's gonna be an interview episode where I'm gonna post an interview with a short filmmaker I did. But after that is going to be lots of Oscar content with the following weeks, all covering the different Best Picture nominees. So I'm very excited to sort of get deep into Oscar season. It is my favorite time of the year, of the movie calendar specifically. Very excited overall. Would you say you're overall excited for this year's Oscars then, Matthew?
Yeah, I'm in an interesting place. I've never been like the death racer, I think is how you put it before. Like I've always aspired to see as many as possible, but if I miss one, I'm not, going to worry about it too much. But I've watched every Oscars since I was like 8, and I love watching it every year. I think I'm in a much better place in the years since I realized it doesn't actually matter. And I do try to, as much as I have my list of snubs, I do try to celebrate the wins more than lament the misses, if that makes sense. So I'm just happy to see people who I don't think there's that many bad choices in any category this year. So that alone is exciting to me because it's going to make it a lot easier to just be like, yeah, that was a great win. I'm happy that person won. Which is what I strive for most years. And I feel like this year has a really good chance of being 100% that.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it, and I'm very excited. I'll end off with this for me. I'll keep track of how many movies I've seen. At this point, I'm at 23 out of the 53 nominated films. So the next Oscar episode I will update everyone on where I stand. Matthew, I really want to thank you for joining today. It's always a pleasure when you come on, especially since now we're officially, I guess, colleagues in a sense of running something together. But if people want to listen more to you, read more of you, what is the best place to follow you and your work?
So my main output every week is obviously the Awesome Friday podcast, which runs weekly, where we review 2 new films each week. And you can find that at awesomefriday.ca. But the easiest way to find all of my content, because I do write freelance for a couple of places and I guest on podcasts, as might be a shock, given that I'm a guest on this podcast. The easiest way to find all of that is to go to my personal portfolio website, which is stretched.ca. And this week I had a couple of podcast episodes and a couple of pieces posted. So it's lots of content this week.
Amazing. Well, I will link to that in the show notes, including your social medias as well, so that way people can find you and your show. And it has been a real pleasure, Matthew. So once again, thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
This has been a That Shelf podcast. Visit thatshelf.com for more great film discourse. Follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at ContraZoomPod. What are your thoughts on this year's Oscar nominations? Send an email to ContraZoomPod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. And if you really like the show, consider tipping us on coffee. Thanks for checking us out.